we wince just thinking about it, right? But if you go back and you think like, well, what do I remember from the film? I remember.
How often have you read a screenplay where nothing happens in the first 10 minutes? No scares, nothing.
All too often. All too often. I think that because the software now can format things for you, and everybody learns about Final Draft or Movie Magic or whatever, they learn about these different programs. It's easy to make your screenplay look professional. It's only when you start to read it do you understand the level of craft that they're at right now, right? And in certain levels of craft, there's always that, oh, we're building to something great. We're building to something great. And that's at a certain level, right? And they may be really, really good at crafting a story and dialogue, and things may seem okay. But if nothing is happening, and nothing is happening by page 10, nothing is happening by page 15, by page 20, when is something gonna happen? I do read a lot of scripts where I wonder that. Or I wonder, what is the point? What is the point? What are you trying to say? Even if you have nothing to say, what is the point of the film? Who's your hero? What is this person going through? How does going through this change them? How does going through this and them changing help them deal with the true antagonist? All those things, all those questions, they aren't answered because they aren't at that level yet. So you're gonna get a mismatch, but for the most part, I would say if I read 10 screenplays, something happens by page 10 in one of them, depending upon which week it is. Not every time does something happen. Not all the time does it. Sometimes it might be 1 out of 20 screenplays.
What if someone says, well, I want to take my time with the suspense? I mean, if you look back at the Stepford Wives, and I realize that's not really horror, it's more like thriller. Mm-hmm. It was a long intro to them coming to this new neighborhood and seeing these wives, and she's kind of confused about what's going on. I mean, it took its time.
Yeah, but the thing about it is it establishes its tone very quickly. And I feel like that's another thing that's missing because so many people haven't found their voice, how they tell a story, right? Because your story may change depending upon whatever genre you've decided to write today, whatever got into you. Like this love story that I'm writing right now, Moon and the Stars, it's people will hear me say it's a love story and they think, oh, romantic drama. And I'm like, actually, no, it's a sci-fi. It's a sci-fi. These people are interstellar travelers, interdimensional travelers, time travelers, and they can do this and they can do that. And they're like, but then where's the love portion? I'm like, well, the love portion's here. But it's a completely different thing than I've ever written. Wanton is a very completely different story than I've ever written. I think that people classify that one as a suspense drama or drama thriller or something like that. So, and that's very different than the horror that I've directed. And even within the horror, I've directed many different types of horror. So no matter what the genre is that you're writing in, you have to at some point have developed your voice and how a person recognizes that it's your film, right? And then once you start to develop your voice, I think it'll help you drastically with maintaining tone of a film. Because your voice is your voice, and it's how you tell a story. And as long as you understand the tone of your own film, you can keep that modulated all the way through. And you can set that at the very beginning. And once you set that tone, like this is where this story takes place in this type of world, you start that from page 1. You start it from page 1. So yes, nothing may happen in terms of someone getting murdered or whatever. You may not get the horror because it may not be a horror. Maybe it's just a movie that's meant to make you squirm and make you uncomfortable. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe the story is speaking to, like with Wanton, it was about a guy who didn't even know himself anymore. So if he doesn't know himself, he doesn't even recognize himself in certain situations. And if you tell him he's done something wrong, he's relying on your truth to tell him he's done something wrong because he doesn't even know right and wrong of himself anymore. And I show that from page 1. If you can't even recognize who you are and what you do in the situation when someone tells you to make it better, how can you? He's like, how do I? How do I do it? And the person has to tell him, I think that's something you can figure out. And he's like, I don't think I can. He really can't. It sets a tone for the film. Nobody died. You know, nobody was hunted down in the first 10 pages. I just set the tone for what the story is. And I think that's, you know, it takes a while before you get to that level of understanding of what you're doing. And then I think now you've gotten to a point where technically you're proficient, you know, but you still have so much more, like so many more levels to climb, you know.
Do you think it's better that someone rushes into a more of a horrific scene or takes their time? Like which is more detrimental to a horror script? Too long to get into the action or too fast?
I mean, again, I think it depends on the point of the story. I think that Scream, which is one of my faves from the 90s, in the first film, it kind of meanders, right? At first. In the first like minute or two, she picks up the phone, she's talking to the guy and making popcorn. Everything seems fine. It seems very casual. It's not until the first kind of slip up that she doesn't hear, that we heard as the audience, that we realize, wait a minute. And then you start to sit forward, right? The story is about a guy who calls you on the phone, he stabs you to death. We didn't see that until, like, it came in probably around the 5-minute mark is when we started to be concerned, right? So in that first 5 minutes, it's like, are we just following this lady? And if you notice, that movie is really, for the longest time, it's a single shot. It's a single shot. She picks up the phone, they pull away from the phone, they're following her around into the kitchen. It's a single shot for a lot of it. And even when they abandon it, they pick it up on another oneer and they're walking around. And it's masterfully done. But it's all about the pacing and the tone. And it slowly becomes more menacing. And once it becomes menacing, it never lets up.
And so again, less about dialogue and more about camera movement.
Camera movement and just really understanding tone. I think, you know, lighting plays cinematography in general plays an incredible role in creating tone. Your cinematography, your editing, post-production sound, musical cues, sound effect, all that stuff plays a huge role in it. But when you're reading it on the page, when you're on the page, something has to set the tone for me to understand why I should care. And a lot of the times I ask, why should I care, very early. I'll ask that on page sometimes 2. I'll ask, why should I care? Now, something may not happen until page 3 or page 4, but I'll be asking myself, why do I care? When I watch movies at home, I'll turn them on. I'll watch for a little bit, but then I'll turn it, because there's so much content that's available right now. Why would I waste time? I treat a movie that I'm watching just like I would a script that I'm reading. I start watching it, and if it's not catching my attention, I have to abandon it.
I think it was harder before because there was so little, you couldn't check a phone, you couldn't have one window open and be over here. You were just like, all right, I'll let it play. You know? And sometimes that worked to its advantage because then it grew on you, but now you have to catch people. And that's why I was asking if you knew the analytics of when people dropped out or if people rewound a scene or something.
Yeah, I don't have it like in terms of analytics from Amazon. I don't have it when someone maybe rewinds it or something. I don't have that, but I do know, I can tell the progression, like people are dropping out. Oh, it's stabilized. And then people watch it all the way through here and then it dropped out. Like I can tell that, you know, but I can't really tell, did they pause it and then go do something and come back? Like I can't tell those sort of things. Or did they rewind? You can't really see that. But the thing about it is that I usually will start my films And I try to get them to a point where you don't feel there's a place to jump off, because something's always building to something else. And one scene leads into the next very naturally. So I'm constantly trying to do that so that it doesn't feel like there's a place to really drop off, or you'll feel like you're missing something because something just happened. So now I have to see how that affects the next thing. And I'm constantly trying to keep that momentum going. And I think that that's what you have to do, or what you should aspire to do when you're doing anything. Something, it always has to be building towards something, or what else are we doing? Why would I be investing my time if nothing in your script is investing towards something bigger?
So a bigger character goal, or a bigger scare, or something with the antagonist?
Yeah, set up your stakes. Give me a character who's interesting, that I care about. Even if you don't want to root for them to succeed, root for them to not succeed. Something. Give the audience something to keep them invested and keep them interested. And it does start with having something in the first few pages, whether it's tone, whether it's an act of whatever that drives the story forward. Give them something that keeps them watching. More importantly, something that lets them know what kind of a ride they're on.
Sure, because even with Hereditary, we didn't totally know. We just knew something ominous
Yes.
was there, and it kind of keeps you on the edge. And you didn't know what was it, though, you know?
Yeah, and the great thing about Hereditary right now is if we talk about Hereditary, the first thing we do is go, Hereditary, we wince just thinking about it, right? But if you go back and you think like, well, what do I remember from the film? I remember there was this like little sibling thing with the brother and the sister. I remember her head hit that pole and it came off. And then I remember he didn't want to, like, he just parked the car and went into the house. I remember the thing from him in the classroom where his face kind of, went crazy and he slammed his head on the desk and stuff. I remember that. And then I remember all the stuff that happened at the end with him, with the mother and the father bursting into flames and all that stuff, and the mom banging her head on. But we're recalling just these few moments. But the fact is that we made it to the end in complete terror because of the tone of the film. The tone was set very early, and they never let up. Even when they had moments where it looked like hope was starting to shine in through the window, it didn't matter. The tone was so dark and ominous and heavy that you felt like, oh, and you felt cold. I don't know if about you, I felt cold watching it, It was such a weird feeling that you got watching that movie, but they kept that tone up throughout the entire film. And that's what I mean is finding your tone and staying with it very early. Something that makes people care and make them keep watching.